This episode of the Stockbury Dark is brought to you by Shop Shogun. Shop Shogun is your one-stop shop for the latest and greatest in punk, hardcore, and heavy metal merchandise. Officially licensed web stores from bands such as 100 Demons, Integrity, Disembodied, Madball, Agnostic Front, and many more. The Stockbury Dark, along with Shop Shogun, are offering a special code to discount your next order when you use it on their website. Use the promo code SDPODCAST to save 10% from your next order from Shop Shogun. Again, the code is SDPODCAST. Their website is shopshogun.com. Also, check out their page, Shop Shogun, on Facebook and at Shop Shogun Merch on Instagram.
Welcome to the Stockbury Dark. My name is Klaus.
And my name is Peter Morrissey. And today we're sitting here, actually in studio at my home in Waterbury, Connecticut, with Greg Thomas. Very happy to have you here, Greg. How you doing today?
Doing good. Happy to be here.
Yeah,
Welcome
Greg's a good friend from Connecticut. You know, we've known him for many years, played in a lot of bands from the state. One was The Risk Taken, moved on to playing in Misery Signals, and he's also in a great new kind of hardcore supergroup called The End, or is it Just End?
Just End.
Just End, yeah, that's right. And Greg's also one of the owners of Silver Bullet Studio in Burlington, Connecticut, where I've been kind of camped up there for the last few months, recording for my new project, Murmur. And, we've got to talking a lot at the studio, become, I think, better friends over the last couple months. And, definitely Greg had some good stories he wanted to tell about a place that he worked at in Connecticut. We just decided a couple weeks ago that he'd be a great guest for the Stockbury Dark. So we're really happy to have him here today to kind of tell his tale.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on here. I've been a fan of the podcast since you've launched it. So it's cool to be here talking to you today.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Thank you.
And yeah, you're welcome. And so, yeah, I basically, we were talking at the studio during one of our, seance / recording sessions. Yeah. And I started talking to Pete about a place that I used to work at. And that's primarily what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. It's this hotel called the Yankee Peddler Inn in Torrington, Connecticut, that I worked for about 3 years in the early 2000s. And it's a pretty notorious hotel in the area. It was built in the 1800s and not really modernized at all until it closed down actually recently, finally. I don't know if you knew that, but it closed down the last couple of years. And it was they didn't really modernize it, so it had these like marble floors and like oak furniture and all this stuff from the like Victorian era, like late 1800s. They'd invested a lot of money in it. And I worked there for 3 years as the third shift manager. So I worked from midnight to 8 a.m., 10 a.m. And the place is considered a very like haunted location. They made a movie about the hotel called The Innkeepers, which Pete, I believe you've seen, back in 2008. And that was filmed in the hotel about stories of the hotel, the different hauntings. And it was made by this director, Ty West, who had done House of the Devil, Cabin Fever 2, a number of horror movies. And I just thought I was telling him, a little about the place. And I'm kind of a skeptic person that's open to the paranormal, but not like a firm, believer in an afterlife. It's hard, it's hard to reconcile my personal, views of like, I don't know if there's a God, but still like, it's hard to deny these different things that we've seen, or, the stories that you guys have had on here and stuff like that. There's definitely more than what you can see around us. It's hard, I feel like the older you get, the more you realize, the more your mind kind of opens up to those things, and you have to let go of, I guess, cold logic and the observable,
Skeptic yet open.
Skeptic yet open.
Which I think is the majority, like I said before, the majority of our guests on here.
Yes.
I think all fall under that realm. We haven't had anyone who has been like just way over the top where we sit here and eye roll through the conversations.
Yeah.
A lot of these
we haven't had any cat ladies on.
Yeah.
A lot of these conversations are prefaced just, the same as Greg, where, I am a skeptic in a lot of ways, but man, some of these things have been impossible to explain scientifically or in any other manner, which is how I prefer to have our conversations.
Yeah.
Be, I want to come from a more believable aspect of life,
Yes.
If there's an explanation for it, and if 90% of the time, that's great too. I would love to know the answers. But man, when we hit on these subjects that don't have an explanation and we're left to our actual wonder of it all, that's where I don't know, the charm of this whole thing begins. And just one question for you before we go any further, Greg. When you started the job at the inn, did you know any of the history before that?
I had a couple friends that worked there from high school, and they had mentioned little things, but I had no idea of the magnitude
of what it was going to open up into.
Yeah, until I started working there. And it wasn't really, the third shift is an interesting shift because you're the only person awake really in this hotel, and you have a lot of responsibilities at night. And I'm like a fan of horror movies, and they used to have like a VHS player in the back, and I used to just like rent out movies and watch. It's a pretty chill thing. I was like, this job is cool. And then I became aware of it because the staff kept turning over. That was the big thing that I took away from that. It's a hotel. It's a 3-floor hotel that the bottom floor are like shops along this like corner on Main Street in Torrington, Connecticut. And then the upper 2 floors are all the rooms, and there's like 50, 60 rooms in there. And so we had a pretty big staff, but people kept leaving because they kept seeing things. So I worked there for 3 years, or like 2.5 years. And when I left, I was the third most senior staff member.
Wow.
Because the
turnover rate.
The turnover,
enormous.
People just couldn't, they would see things, hear things, and it would just, in a very tangible way, it would just freak them out, and they would keep quitting. So that's when I noticed, because like within the first like 6 months there, we lost so many people, and they really tried to keep me on because nobody wanted to do the third shift. That was the worst shift. That's when you're going to see and hear everything.
Of course.
When you started there, did you start with the third shift right away?
Yeah, right away.
Okay.
I went into it because I was like just a late night person anyway, with, doing music and everything, and so I just kind of went in. It was an open position. I feel like that position was always open, probably after I left and before I got there. So within like a month or two, I was the third shift manager. So I was the main person doing that role. I just went in there, and I think the best way to describe the Yankee Peddler Inn to you guys, to just talk about my experience there, is to more or less describe the hotel, so you guys kind of understand it, because it itself, not like at the level of like the Overlook Hotel in The Shining or something, but the hotel has like a personality to itself. So it's like the character, more or less. It's just a thing, almost like an entity of its own. So the easiest way I can articulate it is to describe the hotel itself.
Mm-hmm.
So the Yankee Peddler Inn, it was, like I was saying, it was built in the late 1800s by this couple, the Conleys, Frank and Alice Conley. And Alice Conley, she passed away in the hotel in 1910. And they still had stuff up for her in the hotel when I worked there. It's a very bizarre place. Right above the desk where I worked, there was the newspaper from when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated that they had framed, the original that they had up since that happened, pretty much. And they had all these little vials and old medicine bottles and stuff. They had multiple display cabinets in the kind of lobby area, the front lobby, with these medicine vials. They had this chandelier fireplace, and they had a seat for Miss Conley that they had roped off. Pete, did you ever get a chance to go in?
I've never been in there. I saw the premiere of the movie when it played right across the street at the Warner Theater, and but I've never stepped foot into the actual hotel. And it's such a sad thing now knowing that it's gone, because I feel if they held on for a couple more years and they had the right people to run this place, in the climate of what's going on now with such a fascination with the paranormal and the occult, they could have created such a business there with the right people marketing as a haunted hotel with all its original, style and grandeur of everything that's in there and their displays. It could have been really a booming business, I feel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So they had a chair for Miss Conley that was in the main lobby that was blocked off with rope. It was a rocking chair of hers that she either passed in or was her favorite thing. So as soon as you walk into the place, you're like, well, that's weird to have in this functioning hotel. And they had the elevator there was an Otis elevator with the hand. I would have to bring people up. You run it by hand, and you kind of miss the floor, and you gotta go back and down a few times. Supposedly that was one of the first 100 or so elevators I think ever made.
Really?
Otis was the first company that mass produced the elevators.
Yeah, Otis is a Connecticut-based elevator company that's been one of the first, I think.
Yeah, one of the first ever. So they had this this really rickety elevator that would just scare people right away, because we're not used to getting into elevators like that.
They would have the roll gate that would come across.
Yeah,
I assume.
Exactly. And and my job basically, I would get into work. It was a very interesting job. You'd file all the paperwork, and then I would just have 5 or 6 hours of sitting there before people started to check out.
Was it a busy hotel? A lot of people coming and going?
No, not really. And that really added to the environment. During the winter, we would close off wings of the hotel. And when they would close off the wing, they wouldn't heat it or put electricity into it, really. And I would have to go through and do security checks into those wings. And it would just be with a flashlight, and I would see my breath in the flashlight and just have to go down these hallways and these corridors and just make sure all the doors are closed and nobody was in.
Mm-hmm.
So
you see, Klaus, the town that it's in Torrington, Connecticut, it's a fairly large town, small city that's kind of isolated from the rest of Connecticut. You follow this lone highway, Route 8 north, up until Torrington. It's the last major town in the state before you get deep into the woods or to the border of Massachusetts. And it's an old blue collar town, factory town, just like a lot of places in Connecticut that lost its industry years ago. And it's kind of it's a dead spot. It's a big place for heroin, and there's a lot of beautiful areas within the town, but there's big problems there. So it's not a major destination for anybody by any means. And I'm sure at one point, it had its boom time, just like the rest of the places in the Northeast. Yep. But it's a very dead spot. So I could imagine, a hotel that even had enough rooms for 50 people in downtown Torrington, 1/4 of that would only be used at a time.
Oh yeah, there was periods of time during the winter where I'd be the only person in the hotel. Where I'd just be the only person in this it's a full block. It's a very big place because the rooms are spread out. They were of decent size.
Mm-hmm.
And it just had like a very interesting vibe the entire time that I was working there. I remember, I'll give like a couple stories with it. One of the first days that I was working there, I came in to relieve this woman, Melissa. I still remember her. So she was working. I came in at midnight. She's showing me something on the computer because I'm still learning how to use this. We have a very old computer. It was like the only modern thing. We would do some of the guest registry and stuff there.
And even that was old.
Even that was old. Yeah, it was printing on paper that used to have like the little holes on the side that would like pull it through. You guys remember the printer paper like that?
Oh, yeah.
Like the original, like, so it was out of date by the time I started working there. And she's showing me something on the computer, and we had this chandelier, this like massive, like kind of crystal golden chandelier in the lobby. And the switch for it was kind of next to us. It was a circular switch that you would like turn on, and then you would turn it up to increase the brightness of the light.
So you would press it in and turn it.
Yeah, exactly. And she's showing me something, and then the chandelier that was off came on and then increased to from low brightness to full brightness while we're just there looking at the computer. And we look over at the switch, and it's just doing it on its own.
You saw the actual switch moving.
The switch moved, yeah. I saw the switch move. So, and I'm younger. I'm like 19 at this point, 20 years old at this point, and I'm so skeptical at that age. I was just not into religion, not into anything like that. So I was like, oh, this is like an electric problem. This is, some kind of...
Something's making this move manually.
Yeah, this is whatever. And I'll never forget that because I saw it and I was like, that's weird. And then I looked back at Melissa, and she was like terrified to the point of almost crying because we just watched this thing turn on, and we're about 5 or 6 feet away from the switch. Nobody else is even in the place. And she quit that week. She just, that was like one of the things. People would just see these like switches go on, and the staff that did the cleaning, they would always talk about this little boy that they would see that I never saw.
Mm-hmm.
And the turnover within that staff was incredible because that they would see this like little boy that was running through the hallways. One of the ladies, the head, I guess cleaning lady, Catalina, she had like befriended this boy, but everybody else was just not into it, and they would just leave. So, but yeah, within the first week, I saw that light switch and saw, and had Melissa leave. She was the other person that worked the night shift, and they just couldn't handle these things, And
what kind of age was Melissa?
Melissa was probably in her mid to late 30s. And I think she only worked there for a few months, but that was the last straw for her.
So she had multiple...
Yeah, she had
experiences.
So on the bottom floor, there was a restaurant and like pub kind of area, and she would hear, glasses fall down like all night, and just things like voices in the pub, all these like giant like oak doors and everything. Like everything's like old there, and she actually told me about that the first or second day that I worked there. And then when the light switch thing occurred, she was just done. And they just kept losing people because of that, which is kind of problematic for the hotel in terms of even maintaining, like the few guests that we would have. Everybody was new all the time, so there was no system of everything. So we had that, and then there was a kind of real world, just kind of describing this place more. There was real world problems that we would have in the hotel too, where we would have homeless people break into the hotel during the winter, and they would kind of climb the fire escape or climb up like the side of the building, and they'd break into like rooms, especially during the closed off areas of the hotel. I never found any, but that was my job when I was doing those shifts with looking at the closed off areas, we'd be looking for these. This one guy in particular, I think, and he'd go in. At least, this is what I told myself, right? He would go in, and I would always find after he left, there would be these little piles of chicken bones. He would always leave chicken bones. Like, I don't know where he got that food or what it was. There'd be no other garbage, no, like, soda cans or anything like that. It would just be a neat little pile of, like, clean to the bone chicken bones. And you would just find it in the morning or, like, the next day and be like, oh, fuck, that guy was here again. And it would always be in a different room. And so that was like, even that in itself was a weird thing. And like Pete was saying, there's all drug problems up in the Torrington, Winstead area. So I was always just thinking it was somebody that would just like, kind of like a homeless person that would just like break in and I don't know, eat chicken there, right?
Yeah.
Like it was just another thing, another element to this hotel. So we got all this old Victorian furniture. Everything's like out of date in the hotel. The elevator's out of date. And, I'm walking around different hallways, and then I'm finding these rooms like, oh, the door's cracked open. Oh, there's chicken bones on the floor.
Right.
Just added to the experience, more or less.
So you worked there pre-movie time?
Yeah, pre-movie. Yeah, the movie was 2008, I think, around there. And I worked from 2001 to 2003, 2004. Yeah. Something like that. And
fuck, this is almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's definitely, looking back on it, it's just such a weird time and weird experience to work in.
Especially at such a young age, having that kind of responsibility at a place that notorious. It's
because of everybody leaving. That's why. Because of people leaving, because of the place always changing hands. After the Conleys died, the place changed hands a number of times, and they just couldn't really keep it going for one reason or another. It's such a weird, with that being an issue with the hotel, in further describing it, there was one period of time where I had to go up to the attic to retrieve old paperwork when we were going through like an audit or something like that. And I had to go into the attic. In the attic of the hotel, this is one of the scarier places in the hotel. The attic, I remember going up there, and you walk into this giant room, and it had like 25 or 30 mannequins with wedding dresses on, covered in plastic.
I mean, that's straight out of a horror film right there.
Straight up, like unbelievable. I remember walking into there, and then the filing cabinet and stuff is off to the side, but you've got this like, it almost looks like they're all dancing like a ball or something like that. And it was just these 25, 30 mannequins with the wedding dresses. And I remember seeing that and just being like, what the fuck, and talking to the owner and being like, look, if we're having a problem keeping staff, you probably shouldn't have all these here. Any cleaning lady that has to go up to that, how are you not going to get...
Yeah, with the history of what they have there, they didn't make it an environment that was very welcoming for employees.
Yeah, all these white dresses. So it felt like something out of like Silent Hill.
It's almost dumb. If you want people to stay here, what's the fucking purpose for that?
Yeah, exactly. But that just goes to show you, like I was saying, that the hotel itself almost has this like characteristic. It's like
it lives its own life.
Yeah, the environment itself is just so bizarre. I don't know if they inherited all those wedding dresses when they bought the hotel. They might have already been there. Those could have been there for... They looked very old. I mean, absolutely like cobwebbed and dust, covered in dust and these like plastic wraps. And then, kind of building more towards... So I had a couple experiences. I had a few... things where when I was working, I would hear stuff in the pub, as well, long after it closed. I would hear glasses fall down for no reason. Like that was actually like just a routine part of the job where I'd have to go and clean up these like glass spills that would just occur at night, which is like, in my mind, I'm like, oh, it's a draft or it's like wind or it's whatever, but the older I get and the more open I get, I'm like, yeah, it doesn't make sense necessarily. I remember like a little small story here, which isn't really much of a story, but I remember one time that I was going into the elevator. I had was bringing a couple up. I was, we were right at the front of the elevator, and we heard like a girl scream in the elevator shaft, and I went running up the stairs, and the guy of the couple, the husband or whatever, he went running up the stairs too. I went to the third floor. He went to the second floor, and we saw nothing. They were freaked out. The couple was so freaked out. It's just like this blood-curdling scream, and then we'd run up the stairs instead of using the elevator in case somebody fell. It sounded like somebody fell in the elevator shaft, and then there was just nobody there. And it was that kind of thing that just like routinely was happening. But before I get to my experience with like just kind of the instance that I had, I'm going to tell you a little story about this room that I called well, I'll tell you two things. There was a character that was always living there, or lived there for like a year and a half, this guy I referred to as Bandages, who is this guy that, I know this place sounds nuts, like it's like an American Horror Story, like, season. But there was this guy called Bandages that just like, for some reason lived in the hotel, and he was just constantly have like these medical issues, and he always had these like bandages on his like hands and face, and major, like he was on like morphine or something like that all the time. So talking to him was a bit of a difficult thing. And he was on the third floor, and he would routinely knock down the fire escape and leave through the fire escape, not like go down the main like stairwell and through the lobby. Was he
trying to just avoid interaction with people,
I just don't think he was with it at all. And he just saw exit sign and would just go out there in the middle of the winter. I'd hear this like slamming metal, because those make a lot of noise when you pull those down.
Yeah. Older guy,
yeah. I would say he's probably in his 50s, maybe 60s. And I would just like, sometimes I'd pull into the parking lot, and you would just see this guy hobbling down the fire escape in these bandages. He like would just walk super bizarre, and it was just another part. Obviously like guests didn't appreciate this character. I tried to be nice to him because I didn't know what his situation was. But one time I definitely went into his room. He had like the radio on super loud. I went into his room, knocked on the door. He wasn't answering. Go in. He's laying face down the wrong way on the bed with his like head draped over and his arms like draped over, just kind of hanging off the bed. And I'm like, oh shit, Bandages died.
Yeah, you thought he passed away.
And I just turned down the radio and went back into my desk.
Let someone else deal with this.
Yeah, I didn't really know what to do. Yeah. I was like, could be alive. That sounds terrible, but I was just young, and like this guy was such a weird character, and turned out he was fine because I saw him clanking down the fire escape, the later that week. So there's just weird stuff like that. He was like the guy that lived there, of course, this guy Bandages, only adding to it. And so, yeah, I'm going to tell you about this like place, this blood room or whatever is what I called it, at the time. So this isn't really paranormal so much as it adds to the environment of what the hotel was like. We had this one. I remember this one morning. I got a call from the people down in the basement area, is where we did our laundry for the hotel. And I got a call from the people down in laundry. There was like a laundry chute that the people that were, cleaning the rooms, they would just drop the sheets and everything in this laundry chute, go down to the basement, they would clean it. And I got a call from the people downstairs, and they were like, we just received a set of sheets that are covered in blood. Like, they're soaked. What's going on here? And I was like, I don't know. I'll go up and check it out. So I go up, I'm going through the rooms, and I get to room 101, which is our first room.
Greg, just out of curiosity, when this happened, did you have a lot of guests?
No. This was during a quieter season. So we had maybe 10 guests at the most at that time. And yeah, so I go to this. I find this room. I find the room that this is being worked on, and it's room 101. I'll never forget this experience. The lady that was working there, one of the housekeepers, she was cleaning the floors and the walls frantically, and it looked like the floors and the walls were just covered in blood, like something terrible happened there. And she's just cleaning it. She's just cleaning, and I was like, "What is going on here?" And she didn't speak too much English, and so she's just cleaning this up, and I'm trying to figure out what happened here. And I remembered that it was a guy who had checked out that morning, who paid in cash, no ID, super suspect thing. And I didn't check him in, but I actually called my friend who worked the night before, and he checked him in, and it was a man and a woman who checked in. Only this guy checks out, no ID, room is covered in blood, and, this lady's like frantically cleaning it, and I was just kind of like, why didn't you tell me, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't, I talked to Catalina, who was like I mentioned earlier, the head housekeeper, like, well, what is going on with this? And the girl that was cleaning, she was like, I guess like an, illegal immigrant or whatever, undocumented. So she didn't want to have the police come in. And, yeah. So she just started cleaning this up. Super sketchy thing where this guy is just check it, like cash, no ID is just so rare in the hotel industry, and because we were a struggling place, we would take people like that, which is just like, you're not supposed to, I don't think, legally. And I remember telling my manager at the time, this guy Rudy, I was like, this happened, I think something went down in that room, and he just kind of looked at me and he's like, don't worry about it, just let it go. And I was just like, really? And he's like, yeah, that's just not our problem. And they cleaned the room. So
were there I'm assuming there were no security cameras in the building.
No security cameras, yeah. No, the place had not been like updated really at all.
So no one ever knew what happened.
We never
with the woman that he entered with.
Never saw her leave, and the doors are locked. I mean, unless you're going out the fire escape, which literally nobody did other than this one guy. I would have seen her leave in the night, and she just either she was in his suitcases or whatever. I have no idea. But that's the kind of environment that this place was. This place was notorious for multiple, people had died throughout the years in the place.
Were there like this mysterious deaths there, or murders, or?
Supposedly there was. If you read up, like, a lot of these stories about the place, there's like a couple websites about the Yankee Peddler that go through some of the history, and I was looking at it, yesterday or whatever. I know that, like, the wife of the guy that built it, the Alice Conley, they had the chick, she died kind of mysteriously in one room, this room 353, that people would swear, that's where a lot of problems would come from, this room. People would smell things, hear things, like that's a room that we just wouldn't book unless we absolutely had to, because it was just a problematic room. But I think that there were just, I got the sense that there was years of this kind of thing, like what I experienced in the blood room, more or less, and they just, because my manager had been there for a long time, this guy Rudy, he was just completely unfazed. He was like, yeah, don't worry about it, not our problem. Almost like it was like a haven for that. I know that sounds like terrible, and like I liked the people that ran the place, but he didn't even ask any further questions. That was just that, and end of conversation. Man, we never talked about it again. So that kind of just gives you, the feeling of the place. So I'm going to just tell you guys about the main thing that I experienced. So it's just a couple small stories. You get a sense for this old Victorian hotel. And my main thing was, one night, I remember this very vividly. I'll remember this, till the day I die, because this is probably the most scared I've ever been in my life. I've been in burning vehicles I didn't think I was going to make out, and all sorts of crazy things, and this was the most terrified I've ever been. I remember one night, young, skeptical me, I'm working. It's about 3 a.m. and I hear this sound kind of coming down, like all the rooms are on the second and third floor. And I hear the sound, coming down the stairs. This just like loud sound that was like somebody was like watching TV or listening to the radio, way too loud in one of the upper floors. And that's a thing that would happen sometimes. It was my least favorite part of the job. You'd have to go up and ask people to turn down their radio or their TV. It's just an awkward thing. Usually they're drunk or whatever. This is a time period where we didn't have too many people in the hotel, and it wasn't like it was a weekday, so it wasn't like a party night or anything like that. So it was a little bizarre. So about 3 a.m., I hear this sound. So I'm like, oh shit, okay, somebody's listening to whatever too loud. I gotta go upstairs and figure out what room it is. So I go upstairs, I go up the hallway. Take a left, and it's room 232, just down the hallway to the left. I can tell it's just like something's blaring in there. It sounds like a TV or something like that. So I go back down to the front desk because I wanted to see who was in that room, so I could, be like, excuse me, Mr. Smith, can you turn this down? And so I go and I look in the guest registry, and nobody's checked into room 232. And that's a thing that would happen sometimes, or somebody that worked the night before, they might not have put the stuff through the computer, they just messed up. It was rare, but it would happen on occasion. So I didn't have any paper signed for them or anything in the little like slot that we'd have like the papers with the bills in. So I'm like, oh great. So I don't even know who's in this room, and I've got to, kind of ask them, can you turn this thing down? So I tried to call the room. No answer. It wasn't surprising because the sound that was coming from there was so loud you could hear it like across the hotel, pretty much. And I take the key for the room. We had there was no set amount of keys because they would get lost and found. They would be these old metallic keys on like the old like hotel keychains that you'd see in like Twin Peaks or something like that. So there was a couple keys for the room, but there could have been there's 2 or 3 or 1 for each room. There was no way for me to know whether or not somebody was in there. So I take the key for the room, and I go upstairs, and I knock on the door. The sound is just like crazy at this point. It just sounds like war or something like that. Like there's like fighting, they're screaming, but whatever it's playing through or whatever's making the sound, like the speakers are blowing or whatever. They're like, I don't know if you guys know the sound of like speakers blowing. They're like tearing apart pretty much. So I knock on the door, and there's no answer or anything. And I'm like, this is like, for me, I'm like, this is the worst. This sucks. Like I gotta go into this room. Somebody's like hanging out. I don't even know who they are. I don't have anybody on the guest registry for this room. And I gotta ask them to turn down their thing and also be like, excuse me, by the way, who are you? And very not professional on our end. So I open the door to the room, and the room is just black. It's just completely black, except for it's like a rectangular room, and in the far corner there's a TV on with some kind of black and white war movie playing that's just at full volume, like just tearing the speakers. You can almost like feel the speakers coming apart. And as soon as I saw that the room was like black, I just got hit with this wave of cold. Like it was just like freezing in the room. And this, me being skeptical and young, I just got hit with this feeling of this dread. And I was like, something's wrong. Something's just completely wrong here. And I opened the door, and then I just let the door close. And I was like, fuck it. I quit. I quit this job. Like, I was just never going to happen to me. I'm not going to be one of those people that leaves. And just at that moment, I was like, that just the way that the room was like a different temperature, and everything, like, it just hit me so hard. I was like, I quit. It's not worth it. If I go in there, I'm not coming back. I just had this, like, certainty about this. And I never experienced anything like that in my life. And I'm just standing there, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to quit right now. I'm just going to go home. I'm just going to leave a note to the owner. I'm like, sorry, you know. It just freaked me out so much. And then I, like, rallied. And I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to go in. That's it. Like, I'm just saying this, like, almost, like, uncharacteristic panic mode here. And I'm like, fuck, all right, I'm just going to do it. Like, whatever, you know. And so I opened the door again. And the door, the way that these doors would work is there was little magnets in the top corner that would keep the door open when people were bringing in their luggage. Mm-hmm. So I opened the door, and it, you know, connects to the magnet and stays open. And I try the light switch. The light switch doesn't work.
Of course.
Yeah. And the way that the rooms were set up, they were like lamps, so they could be turned off at the lamp. Mm-hmm. You know, it wasn't like a overhead light or anything, because everything was still old. These old beds, old everything. You know, the TV was the most modern thing. The TV was old. And the TVs that we had in there, for reference too, were the old, like, tube TVs, like very
big giant blocks.
Big giant, like, wood paneling on the side, like giant block TVs. And so the light switch doesn't work. And it's a long room, and the TV's in the opposite corner. And I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go in. I'm just going to do this.
So how much light? Was there enough light coming in from the hallways you can see?
Kind of. Everything in that hotel was dim. Yeah. Everything. Because everything was just old. It was poor lighting across the entire place. So I couldn't see into the room at all because of the angle of it, because it's a long rectangular room and it's in the far corner. I'm in, like, you know, kind of like the right corner, and this is like in the far left corner. So I couldn't really see in at all. I actually couldn't see anything inside the room. And when we were in nighttime, we would dim the lights in the hallways. Mm-hmm. So there was basically no visibility into this place at all. And I'm like, fuck it, I'm just going to go in. And I walk over to the TV. The only thing I could see was, like, the light of the TV. For some reason, I very vividly remember this. It's not lighting up anything in the room, pretty much. And it's this old black and white war movie playing. I go over to the TV, and the TV had a similar switch to, like, what the chandelier was like, where it's the type of TV that you would pull the switch out to turn it on.
Right.
And then you would turn it, and it would also control the volume.
Right.
So it's not like there's no timer on this TV. This couldn't have come on. It's not like an alarm clock somebody left on or something like that you can have with modern TVs.
No, you physically turn it off and on.
Yeah, you physically have to pull the switch out and turn it all the way up for this to be happening. And so I walk over to the TV and realize that the switch is all the way up. So something turned this on or whatever. And I'm looking at the TV. And I'm just feeling this sense of dread, like you know, you guys experience stories like this. It's different. There's like a mood or an energy or something in a room where you just know something's wrong. And I think that's something that's been shared by a lot of your guests, where it's like,
just this heaviness.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I don't believe in ghosts, and then you're in a room like that, and you're like, okay, well, something I don't understand is wrong here. So
could you notice in the room if it was empty, if someone was inhabiting it? Was there clothes or a suitcase or?
Oh, it looked like there was nothing.
It's untouched.
It looked like there was absolutely nothing in there. Yeah. And I go over to the TV. The lights still aren't on because I just walked straight there. I couldn't get the lights on. And I push in the thing. I turn off the TV. The TV was definitely, speakers are just blowing. Like, they're just, like, shredded and, like pushing against the actual TV. I turn the TV off. And if you guys know, when you're in a dark room and you're looking at something that's like light, and then you turn it off, you're like extra blinded for a second. You see like the imprint of the TV. I saw like the imprint of the TV on my like retinas, you know?
Yeah, that light stays almost.
Exactly. So I turned that off, and this, like I said, this feeling of dread and everything, I turned that off. And the second that I turned that off, the door magnet gives, and the door starts to close, and I see the light going away from the hallway, the faint, just dull glimmer of the light, and the the feeling of cold hit me again in like a way that most scared that I've ever been in my life. And I basically just screamed, and I felt like if I didn't get out of that room, I was never...
You were
like,
trapped.
I felt like something
was in there. That door would not open.
Yeah, I felt like something was in there. And for the magnet to go makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's not connected to electrical. There's nothing electrical about it. There's nothing over there. Nobody's even in this part of the hotel, period. And so I just like screamed and I ran, and I just got my fingers in the door. The door slammed on my fingers, like as it was closing, and I just held the door open and got it open and just like fell out in the hallway, and then the door slammed closed behind me. And that was it. Like I just knew if I didn't get there, I wasn't going to get out. Like,
I mean, the one thing that could go wrong happens.
Yeah, the one thing that goes wrong, like I was like, I knew there was some kind of something felt wrong in that room, and it just felt like it was trying to keep me there.
Yeah, like lured you there to keep you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's terrifying.
We checked out the housekeeping. I had housekeeping check out the room in the morning. Nothing was there. Nobody was there. Nothing was changed.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing was whatever.
Yeah.
There's no reason for that TV to go on. And in my mind, when I was like panicking and running, like I thought maybe there's a ghost there. Also, maybe one of the homeless people's in like the bathroom. The bathroom was next to the where the TV was.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought there could have been like one of the homeless guys just there waiting. You know, the thing goes and it just starts attacking me in the dark, like just this fucking insanity, like this drugged out person. Like what was running through my mind at that time was just this whole range of possibilities. But that experience in itself, I'll never forget that. I can still vividly picture every single element of that. And
so once you left the room, were there other people working that night?
No, nobody was working any night. I was the only person working any night.
So what did you do once you got outside the door?
Oh, I just fucking went downstairs and sat at my thing. I didn't leave.
Did you call anyone or talk to anyone?
No, there was nobody to call. There was nothing. I was just on my own in that hotel every single night, you know.
And I mean, this was also like pre-social media in regards to like who's up at this time.
Yeah, there's no social media. I don't have a cell phone. I don't have anything at that time period. So I had no cell phone light to go in. I had nothing like that, you know. And I just stayed there. Like, I really wanted to quit that night. And I worked for a little bit longer, but I just couldn't reconcile, you know, the feeling that I know it sounds nuts, but like that the hotel wanted to like keep me there.
Yeah.
You know, I'd been there longer than like almost anybody else, and it just was like knew I was like indignant,
right?
And like had that experience with just pulling me to this room 232. I'll never fucking forget that.
Wow.
To me, it doesn't sound nuts at all. That's what I was thinking about as you were trying to get out of that room. Like the hotel itself almost wanted you to stay in there, but forever. Absolutely.
I mean, man, like the combination of the TV and like it was an old black and white war movie playing, and it was like almost looked like a scene like D-Day or something like that. So it was just carnage and killing and screaming and explosions, and that's all I heard. And it was like the scene went on forever because the whole ordeal was probably like 10 or 15 minutes total from when I figured out, you know, looking through the records and everything. And it was like that was the only scene that was playing. It was almost on like loop from like another era. It looked like a movie from like the 50s.
Caught in the time warp almost.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it definitely felt like that. And, you know, as I think some other guests have, you know, described, when you're in a room or a thing like that in like a house or whatever, the temperature difference is what strikes you sometimes. Right. The fact that it was substantially colder in that room.
Yeah, that's a very common thing, you know, for people when they for a temperature drop when there's some sort of like presence or
That's the first thing that hit me when I opened the door.
And it's a drastic temperature drop.
Drastic temperature change. And just the feel like...
And this was in a part, obviously, the hotel where it was open. Heat was
on,
open,
yeah. It was open, yeah. We didn't have a lot of guests, but this part of the hotel, nobody was really there because it was just... Nobody was ever really there, you know?
Greg, which floor was it?
Second floor. So yeah, it was room 232. So it was the room started on the second floor, second and third floor. So it was just in the 200s and 300s that we had the rooms.
Was that ever a problematic room before that you knew of? Any?
No, not in particular. It was a room that was used a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't like some isolated weird room.
Yeah.
But there was no like, the only problematic room was that 353 where Mrs. Conley died. That's the only one that we like avoided just out of whatever superstition, unless people really wanted to stay there for that reason.
Would you get guests there that knew of the history
Yeah.
of the hotel? These like maybe amateur ghost hunters or
Yes, that
people
was,
doing a documentary or a write-up about the place looking for something.
It was in a number of magazines and like online when like blogs were, early 2000s, so blogs are starting to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So there were people that would go and stay there.
People would travel from,
for that reason.
in particular to stay there.
But like I said, I just wrote a lot of it off until I had my own experience. I would write off everything, that light switch with the chandelier right on the offset should have, and then all the glasses falling, like having a clean, like shattered glass every night in a bar doesn't.
And when
make
does a
sense.
draft knock a glass?
Yeah, there's
over?
no.
It's impossible.
Yeah, there's no
high winds blasting through there.
And I wrote off the entire thing until that experience, and then that kind of like opened my perception towards it, because that whole thing shouldn't have happened. There's no, like I was saying, there's no switch. There's no way that there was like a power surge that would have had that switch physically come out and turn all the way up.
Mm-hmm.
That's just too much of a physical manifestation.
And so you didn't last much longer after that experience.
Yeah, I only worked a few months after that, and then I left to like start touring and all that kind of stuff. And
was there anything else past that you experienced?
Not really. Most of what I got for the stories were
other employees.
The other employees leaving. Yeah. They would just hear voices. They would see that boy. That boy was a common thing.
Mm-hmm. Was there any history to that people put together?
I looked it up and I couldn't find any history on that. It was just like.
Do you know how they described him?
A little boy with dark hair.
Mm-hmm. Like clothing from a certain era or anything like that.
I think I got the impression that the boy was not recent at all.
Mm-hmm.
That it was dressed very plainly.
Yeah.
Like I said, the one lady, Catalina, she had kind of befriended the boy.
Really?
Yeah, she had kind of befriended the boy and would play little games with him.
Would she see like a true like physical like manifestations of him?
Yeah, she would tell me. She was like, our whole housekeeping, they were all like immigrants from one place or another, and she was like very like old world.
I'm sure she was a religious person as well.
Yes, she was a religious person, so she would leave little things out for him, little toys and things like that. And the other staff would see him, but they would just quit. Yeah. Like I said, everybody kept quitting there. They just couldn't keep people. And
but she would leave toys out even.
Yeah, she would leave. She
crazy.
had like these she had like little games with him. So she'd like leave like a little ball out for him, and then it'd be like somewhere else later, And I never really, because I didn't really just grill her about it. Be like, this is bullshit, like whatever. I was like, okay, Catalina, like you're nice, and just kind of like let her tell me the stories until, I experienced my own. And I think at that point she wasn't working there because everybody left eventually. It got to everybody eventually. The manager, when I left, it was me, the general manager, and the owner was the only people, and they eventually left and sold it too. Like one of the last things they did was film that movie there, and they just pretty much closed it for good after that.
So was it closed right after the movie?
Pretty much, yeah.
And then you told me the other day, Best Western.
Yeah, Best Western. Yeah, somebody bought it and they're remodeling it to be open. It's taken them a few years now, but they're going to try to reopen it as like a more modern place.
And cost Best Western is like a, kind of like a budget chain.
Yeah, I know.
Hotels in America.
Unfortunately, I've stayed there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what they're going to do with the place. Like all the newspapers that were up and all the antiques. They had like antique old like ships in the bottles. People used to make those like models. They would have that all along the lobby.
That'd be such a shame for them to, change
redo any of that.
It's a historical place in its own right,
all the old keys and everything, and the box with all the keys of the rooms laid out like you would see in just like a movie or something like that.
My theory is that they can do whatever they want. They will never be able to get the dread off that place.
I don't think so either. You know, that place was just, it felt different. At first I really liked it, you know, where I was like, oh, this is just a cool spot. And I like horror movies and stuff like that. But I was so resistant to the things that I would see or smell or hear or anything like that. I was so resistant to it and stubborn about it until that one experience, and then, you know, eventually left. But it definitely just, you know, I'm going to go there when they open it up, when they reopen it. I want to see what they left, you know, the old banisters and the stairwell. And,
yeah. I feel like they can't take that stuff out of there. You know,
and it was nice. It was too, like as run down in a way that it was. Everything was nice.
I'm sure it had its own charm and everything.
Yeah, everything was nice. So, yeah, that's the Yankee Peddler.
Well, it's a very interesting story to actually have a first-hand account of an employee there, you know, that's been there for an extended period. Because I've never spoke to anyone who worked there or knew much about it outside of the stories, you know. So, yeah, very cool, man. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome, man.
I know we were going to touch on another subject briefly, where Greg has his studio in Burlington, Connecticut. Right down the street is a very well-known cemetery that is, you know, has its own lore and its own history. Seventh-day Baptist Cemetery, also known as the Green Lady Cemetery, which, you know, for a very long time, maybe stories dating back maybe to the late 1800s.
It was made in the 1700s.
Yeah, well, I know some of the stones there for the 17th, but I think the reports of the hauntings maybe started in the 1800s, mid to late 1800s, of a woman who haunts the cemetery and the marshes and the swamps around that area, who's known as the Green Lady.
It has been mentioned on the show before.
Yeah, I brought it up. I think I made a post on it on our Instagram account, you know, and touched upon it. And yeah, this is actually right down the street from where Greg's home is, where the studio is. And, you know, this is a place I'm very familiar with. I grew up going to this place as a teenager. You know, I must have visited there at least 100 times in my life. I had quite a few, you know, experiences and feelings there with friends on multiple occasions. Yeah, it's a heavy place. It's a heavy place. It's not many stones left in there. A lot of them have been destroyed over the years. I forget the name of the road that it's on. Upson Road.
Yeah, Upson
Road.
And
yeah, it's a gravel and dirt road that you travel down maybe about a third of a mile until you get to the actual cemetery towards the end of the road, and then right beyond the cemetery, I think it was an old camp. Which is boarded up, and it's fenced in. Across the street in the woods that we explored there through the trails was
Pete.
Yes.
Is this the cemetery where there's recordings from, with like mumbling?
No, background? This was another one called Guntown Cemetery in Naugatuck that we experienced with. We had some recordings as well, but I'm sure there's stuff from this cemetery as well. Over the years, a lot of ghost hunters have been there. A lot of paranormal teams have been there and did some studies on it. But I'll let Greg talk about it a bit since it's a location that's close to him.
Yeah. So this is about only like 15 minutes away from the hotel too. So we're in the same general area here, and this place, the Green Lady Cemetery, they had done an Unsolved Mysteries episode actually about that.
I've never seen
I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
There was an Unsolved Mysteries episode about it, you know, in the 90s or wherever. And it's kind of like tucked into the woods. There's only a few headstones left, and one of the headstones that's left is for this lady Elizabeth, I think it's Palmater. And that's the person who people think is the Green Lady, that you go into this cemetery and people see this like green kind of mist moving along it, that they've labeled this, and she died in 1800 at the age of 30, and was supposedly like thrown into the swamp or the lake that's like right on this street there, and that's at least the folklore behind this. I only went to I've only, living so close, I've only gone to the Green Lady Cemetery one time.
Wow.
And it was with clients of mine when I started the studio, 15 years ago or whatever. It was one of the first things we did. And these clients were like, oh, you're next to the Green Lady Cemetery. We got to go there. And I'm still at my just dumbass, skeptical younger self. And I was like, yeah, we'll do it. I didn't really want to do it because, I had my experience with the hotel already. And I was like, just whatever. And this band was like, I don't remember which band it was, but they were so all about going there. So we got it was we got our flashlights ready. We drove there, and you got to park on this gravel road and walk into the woods just a little. And we had flashlights, and when we got close, this was the thing. When we got close, one of the guy's flashlights kind of stopped working. I mean, it was a time period where the flashlights were all pieces of shit with the batteries in them and stuff. Anyway, he's banging on the flashlight trying to get it to work. And we're like, all right, whatever. I got mine. Get out of the car, walk into the woods. My flashlight just stops, dead as soon as we get close to it. And we were all like, fuck it, we're out of here. That's it.
Yeah.
And we just got back in the car and left. But that place, and I never went back. That place also feels just completely off. In that whole area, before we started doing the podcast, I was talking to Pete. There was a girl that was a 26-year-old woman that was murdered, and her body was left in the swamp just a couple months ago.
Yeah, this is a recent one.
Yeah, just a couple months ago. And the guy that they found out, the guy that killed her was from Waterbury and brought her body up to there for some reason and just put her in the swamp, and they found her a few days or weeks later. So people, there's all sorts of the town that's in, Burlington, and this whole area. I mean, I guess a lot of areas have stuff like that, but there's been so much murder and just kind of darkness that's beyond just the folklore that kind of prevails in the area. And just having somebody, another lady of a similar age, be left in that swamp even just a couple months ago. It's just some areas just never change. The scenery might change. These things,
right.
In a static loop of these late 20s, early 30s women getting killed, left on that street.
Violent deaths traveling over time.
Yep.
Yeah, in that one area too. But yeah, Pete, did you have any experiences there yourself?
I've never actually seen there any sort of apparition there. I've taken hundreds of pictures over the years. Quite a few displayed your typical orbs and things like that show up in nighttime photography. A lot of just feelings of darkness and dread there, where we can just be standing there and conversing with friends and telling stories, and the next thing you know, you could feel almost that temperature drop, and it gets silent, and everyone gets that same feeling at the same time of, let's leave. We have to get out of here now. And you're speeding down this gravel road, 60 miles an hour. I experienced people's pets really going ballistic in the cemetery. Where the main entrance is, there's those two massive trees. I'm not sure if they're oak trees. I'm not sure, but they're massive. The circumference is, huge. And we were there one night, and this guy pulled up in his Jeep, and he had this giant Rottweiler, and the guy started telling us some ghost stories about the town. I think he was from there, and this is probably in the early 90s. And as we're sitting there, he said his dog has sensed presences before in the cemetery. We're listening to him, and as he's saying that, we hear the dog start growling, and he is at the headstone of the woman.
Yeah, Elizabeth.
Nose down to the ground at the stone, head on, and then growling wildly, Jesus. And we're just sitting there in silence watching this dog, and the guy's not saying a word. And we just looked at him we think he found something. And the dog was relentless with it. He wouldn't stop. He kept calling the dog back. The dog wouldn't listen. He just kept returning to the stone, and just, something was there, and it was very aggravating towards him. And, suffice to say, about a minute later, we were all in our cars, just getting out of there.
There's actually, I do have a story I can share about that's been passed to me. by the friends of mine, Jeff and Jay Aust, the guys I played in like With Honor with, and kind of Connecticut hardcore guys. Their dad, Charlie Aust, used to live around that area, and he rides motorcycles and stuff like that. And he won't go next to the Green Lady Cemetery. I remember hearing this, that he had an experience where he was riding his bike down Upton, and when he got close to the road, his bike just stopped working.
Just cut out.
Just cut out, and he had to walk it.
Oh, I couldn't imagine walking that road.
Oh, yeah, he walked it, I guess, for like, a while, like maybe half a mile or something. And then it started work. He tried it again. It started working again. And that didn't dissuade him from going back, because he used to live in that area. Those guys used to live in that area or whatever. But he went back. The next time he went back, his motorcycle died again at the same area. And so he will never go there. And he tells his kids, stay away. He's like, I don't believe in that shit, but just don't fucking go there.
Yeah.
And they would tell me that for years. And I remember hearing about that. It was one of the reasons I didn't really go there. And when I went there and the flashlight didn't work, 2 flashlights don't work, I was like, fuck this. I don't want to get wrapped into this or bring this home with me or something.
Right.
Whatever this is. It's close enough, like a stone's throw from my recording studio. A perfect place to be recording.
I know.
But so I remember hearing about that story, and I think almost everybody in the town's got at least.
I'm sure.
Everybody goes and sees, and
it's one of those places, where everyone probably has a story or two that have been passed down, or an experience, and it kind of maybe even gets exaggerated over the years. But there's definitely that feeling of that place when you're there, and it might just be the actual ride into it at midnight on a dark, heavily forested
it's also
road,
like in the forest,
no light whatsoever. It just breathes.
There's something about those woods out there, and just finding like these like little old cemeteries from the 1700s in the woods that are just.
Yeah, I mean, they're as ancient as they can be, for especially in New England. Some of the oldest settlements, that probably were filled with a lot of tragedy at the time. And
a lot of these towns in this area were populated in the 1630s and 40s, were a lot established. Some of them getting established around that era. So it's just everybody has stories for the Green Lady Cemetery, and you can go. You can go online and look up the Yankee Peddler Inn and look up Green Lady, and you're just never going to get all these stories. There's just out-of-date blogs with, like, hearsay. Actually, like, experiencing it is a different thing.
Agree. Well, Greg, you've been a great guest, man.
Thank you.
Loved having you. It was very interesting, especially the hotel. Like I said, it was great to have a first-hand account of someone who was there, and for a long time. And heard the other people's stories and seen people come and go, and having your own experiences there. It's pretty wild, man. We thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you very much for making the trip down and coming and sharing that with us.
Yeah, Greg, I will never forget these stories ever. There was so much in this. I'm thinking about where the hell is Bandage Man now, if he's still out there.
Bandages. Yeah, so many characters. Just working at a hotel like that is such an experience, And like I said, I went in skeptical and left. I guess we all do that in life. Come in skeptical
and left with way more answers than you can imagine. Klaus, these are all the places when you come take a visit we're going to be hitting. So keep a record of everything local to me, because we're going to do the circuit once you get to Connecticut.
If they open that up as whatever they call it now, the Best Western, you guys should do a podcast episode in there.
Yeah, that would be great. I don't know if they'd want that kind of advertisement with
just
the new Best Western. We could just do it right from our room, though, I guess.
232 or 353.
Yeah, that would be great.
Me and Pete go in, and only Pete leaves in the morning.
Yeah, cash, no ID.
Yeah. All right, excellent. Well, that's another great episode of Stockbury Dark. And, Klaus, anything you'd like to add before we end this?
No, thank you so much, Greg. This was an absolute pleasure. It was, like I said, I won't forget these stories. It was a special thing from start to finish. Fantastic.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, well, that's it. Wrapping up. We'll see you guys very soon. We got some great episodes lined up in the coming weeks, so stay tuned, and we'll be signing off. Thank you.
Good night.